welcome to week 1 of English 101, and today we're going to be looking at verbs. So first of all, what does English 101 mean? Well, there's a reason I called it English 101 and not Grammar 101, because if I called it grammar, nobody would be watching today. People think grammar is really boring and really difficult, but I'm hoping to change your mind. And 101, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to start by building a really strong foundation. If you think about language, any kind of language, in the newspapers, on television, songs, anything, all of that has grammar as a foundation so that we can understand it. So we're going to be starting from the bottom, thinking about grammar as the foundation and making sure that that's nice and strong so that we can build on top of that. First of all, we're going to be looking at verbs today and actually next week as well. So why start with verbs? The verb is really the heart of your sentence. It tells you what is happening in a sentence. It tells you when it's happening. It can also tell us how something is happening. So is it standing still in time or is it moving? What does it look like in a sentence? It's also a reflection of who is in your sentence, and we'll have more about that later in this class. So what we can say is there are lots of different types of sentences in English, lots of variety. But for our purposes, because again we're thinking of that foundation, what we're going to look at is one of the basic building blocks of English, and that's called subject plus verb. Now, don't switch off. This is simpler than it sounds. Remember, our verb is the heart of your sentence, and the subject is the person, for our purposes, who is in control of that verb in very simple sentences. So let me give you an example. If you were going to ask me, Sarah, what do you do when football comes on the television? I would say, I sleep. Why? Well, number 1, football is very boring. And number 2, I structured this sentence because that's what we do in English. I sleep. So we have a subject plus a verb. Okay. Other examples of this, you should be able to see these on your screen, will be I live, I breathe, I work, I am. So in all of those sentences that you can see there, all of those sentences follow the same structure, which is the subject, that's the person who's in control of the verb in these sentences, and the verb. And those fit together into a little brick. Okay, that's how we're going to build that foundation that we spoke about earlier. Now, of course, the problem with these sentences is that this doesn't give us very much information. If I take that first example that we had a moment ago, I live. Okay. I live makes sense, you can understand what that means, but it doesn't really give us a lot of information. So let's add some information on to the end of it. I live in Newry. Okay. So what we've got is we've got a sentence that has our subject, it has our verb, and it has some extra information that is telling us something more, that is giving you more information and starting to build up a picture of what it is that you want to say. So let's look now at the other sentences that I showed you. We have I live in Newry, I breathe air, I work at AMH, I am happy. So now what we've got is we've got a selection of sentences. They're simple sentences, but they're giving you information. They're building up a picture, in this case about me. Okay? And all of those at the core of them, at the bottom, have got this subject plus verb structure. Okay, let's go back to our simple sentence. I live in Newry. Now, of course, what we can see is the subject is I for our sentence. That means I am in control of the verb, I live. But what if I don't want to talk about me? What if I don't want to use I in this sentence? And we're going to change it to he. So we're talking about someone else. Now the problem now, you can probably spot it, is that the verb no longer works with he. He live in Uri sounds wrong. And of course the reason for that is because verbs can change depending on the person that you're talking about. So instead of he live in Uri, it should of course be he lives in Uri. And this is a very common pattern for most verbs in English. We'll talk about the other verbs next week, but for most verbs in English, this is what you're going to do. If you're talking about he, or she, or it, and you've got your verb in the present, what you need to do is you need to add some kind of S sound onto that. Sometimes the spelling changes a little bit, but don't worry too much about that yet. So let's look at our other sentences. We have he lives, he breathes, he works. Okay. So all of those sentences, you can see the verb is now changed. We've added the S because it shows, it's a reflection of who is in your sentence, who is in control of the verb. Okay, now many of you might be thinking, Sarah, this is way too easy. We know how to build these sentences. Yeah, you probably do. This is the kind of language that we use every day. This is the kind of language that you'll hear in music, and if you're reading newspapers, it's everywhere. It's that first brick, it's that first block. And remember, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make good blocks so that we can create a good foundation so that your English can build on top of that. So have a look at this quote from the famous French philosopher. We're not going to look at French or philosophy, don't panic. But from this famous French philosopher René Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am." It's a very, very famous quote, but if you look at it, what we've got are those basic building blocks. I think, therefore I am. Again, it's this structure that we've been talking about today. Another quote from Walt Whitman. I lean, observing a spear of summer grass. I lean, observing a spear of summer grass. I lean. So it's the subject-verb connection again. And think about the song I Feel Fine by the Beatles. I feel. So again, it's that simple building block that we've got that's making up the basis of all of those quotes. So basically, your homework, yes, there is homework. Your homework for this week is to look at two things. First of all, number one, who is Walt Whitman? So Google him. Google is your friend here. Google Walt Whitman and see if you can find out a little bit more about him. If you like, you can send me through your ideas to my email address. Everybody should have that. Or if you want to take part in this interactively and you don't have my email address, talk to your key worker because they'll be able to put you in touch. That's homework number one. Homework number two is to look for and listen for this structure in what you're reading or what you're listening to this week. And that can be anything. We've said this before. If you're reading about sport, the sports pages, if you're listening to the radio, if you're, binging on Disney movies like I am not, working very hard, Colin, any of those things, whatever it is that you're doing, reading the back of cereal packets, anything. English is everywhere. See if you can find this little structure, this little brick that we've got. That's our subject and our verb. Okay? Next week what we're going to look at is basically what happens when we have these rebel verbs. So for most verbs, as we said earlier, they follow a certain pattern. You have I work and he works. But there are verbs in English that kind of do their own thing. They're a bit like James Dean. And I suppose that's the question for next week. What does a verb and James Dean have in common? So have a think about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Mark is running a creative writing group. It was on in Tannockmore on a Thursday. Some of you may have been at it. But if not, he's going to be doing that obviously remotely now, through email, through WhatsApp or through text. And what that will look like is he's going to send out some prompts every day, and you can kind of to spark your imagination. You can use those prompts to write something, and optionally you can send those back to him if you like. This is a great way. I mean, what we're looking at here is the technical stuff like how to build. And what Mark's going to do, he's going to take those technical things and he's going to add creativity to it. So it would be a really good way of practicing the techniques and the grammar basically that we're going to be looking at in this class. If you're interested in taking part in Mark's class, again, email me. You all have my email address. Contact Mark directly or speak to your key worker and they'll get you guys connected and you can take part going forward. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed that. Any comments, suggestions, questions, send them through to me please. Next week, remember, it's going to be why is a verb like James Dean. Thank you.